everyone. Welcome to our, what is this, the fourth bonus episode of Lights, Camera, Accolade, coming at the heels of our previous bonus episode where we watched Hot Frosty. So it's hard to follow that one up. Yeah, I'm so sad that you missed it, Abby, because it really was probably the most visually impressive movie we've watched so far.
Incredible. Say that's still true in a color sense.
Yeah, at least they did have a great use of color in the movie.
Shocking,
the red scarf
amazing.
Really stood out.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you have to go back and watch it.
Got it. I'll go back for that one.
Excellent. But the movie we watched for this bonus episode is, I feel like, extremely relevant because we, just wrapped up, obviously, the episode this month for the 4th Academy Award, where the movies were less than stellar. As a reminder for everyone, more so, honestly, for the podcast, we watched East Lynne, Front Page, Trader Horn, Cimarron, and I think and Skippy.
Ugh. Skippy is saved. He isn't as bad as the others.
Yeah, not as bad as the others, but what a bad year for movies. And so because of that, obviously we had gone back to be like, well, what else came out that year? And, what was really snubbed? And so we watched one of the movies that we had mentioned last time. We chose to watch M, because of course it was my choice and I chose the more depressing one. And I'm really glad we did. But ultimately, I feel like it kind of makes sense to not be nominated because it is, to be fair, a German film. So maybe, foreign film in terms of being nominated. Like City Lights might have been the most appropriate snub film to watch, but this one just seemed so much more interesting. And we'll definitely get into topics about, I don't know, how groundbreaking it was overall. But first we can do a summary for people who haven't watched the movie and don't intend to watch the movie. But I will preface this by saying, you really should watch this one. But Jake, you want to summarize?
Sure. Well, thank you, Sarah. And thank you so much for this selection of this film, because I have to say, not to put my cards on the table too early, but I think it was one of my favorites so far. And I think most of our listeners who take the time to watch this one will find it very interesting as well. Particularly any true crime lovers out there, not to mention any rival podcasts or anything, but if any of you are into those murder podcasts, this film M is sort of almost like a progenitor of that whole entertainment genre. But let's talk more about what the movie actually is. I'm going to keep it pretty succinct so that we can have a full-throated discussion about it. But M was filmed in 1931 by Fritz Lang, who is another famous old-timey director with an eye patch. Him and John Ford. I don't know if they were competing with each other.
Yeah, he lost an eye, right?
I really need to learn more about Fritz Lang.
Yeah, now I want to learn more. He did make Metropolis. I know that.
Yeah, same. That's about all that I knew about him and his kind of style, but I knew nothing about his life. But continue.
Yeah, so a German filmmaker, he makes this film in 1931. Shortly after that, leaves Germany because of the rising political tide of unrest and comes to the United States. But the film itself opens on an unnamed German city, and we're looking kind of at an ominous scene where a little girl is being bought a balloon animal from a blind street peddler by a mysterious man whose face is kind of obscured on the screen, but he's humming a very kind of melodic, unnerving tune. Do, 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 do. What's the name of that song, Sarah?
In the Hall of the Mountain King.
In the Hall of the Mountain King. So if you YouTube that or Spotify that, you'll be like, oh, I know that one. So imagine, him buying that balloon, and then we see as they march off their wanted posters for someone is abducting and murdering children in the town. So very serious topic for a movie this early. So we're led to believe that young girl who we're introduced to is very unfortunately dispatched by this shadowy gentleman. And so the movie unfolds into the hysteria of these child murders taking place in the city, really gripping the entire community. Things are grounding to a halt. Businesses can't function. People are being rounded up by the police, facing arbitrary questioning. Even the criminal underground element in the city, they're unable to do business because the police are just, as I say, rounding everyone up, questioning everyone, really at a loggerheads over how to find this murderer. And so what unfolds is a really interesting kind of upstairs, downstairs, if you know that trend in filmmaking, version of a police procedural where you have the traditional state, the police, kind of bumbling and doing their best using kind of rudimentary investigative methods to find this serial killer. And you have a lot of scenes of detectives at desks talking to each other and trying to track down leads. And then parallel to this, you have the criminal underground in the city who is getting very frustrated that they're losing out on business. They can't operate the way that they used to because the police are all out in full force, and just very understandably disturbed on a human level by these murders that are going on with these young kids. So they actually launch their own sort of informal investigation, and they utilize things like different street peddlers and beggars on the streets. They create almost a little network of, as Varys would say on Game of Thrones, little birds to monitor everyone in the city and kind of track down who the killer is. So the movie unfolds and you see both sides doing their best. But what really cracks the case is that balloon salesman from the beginning remembers that tune because he hears the killer whistling it again. And that's when he clues in his other comrades, and they eventually they track down the killer. And one gentleman has the smart idea to put chalk on his hand and slap in the back, and it looks like a big M on the back of his coat. So that's when he's really visually identified, and hence the name of the film. So they track him down to this big office building. The criminal element surrounds the building and breaks in and ends up cornering him after some time and some bumbling, actually finding him in the cellar. They drag him off. They beat the police in the pursuit for this killer, this awful, awful guy. And what ensues is a really what I thought was my favorite part of the film. It's right towards the end where they bring him kind of underground to this big vault, I want to say, only it's almost like a cellar. And there's must be several hundred of these either criminal elements or lower income or poor members of the city, and maybe some families of some of the victims gathered in this almost informal mob tribunal. And so they have this this guy there, and they're really reading him the riot act. It seems like his goose is cooked, so to speak, but he pleads, he has this compulsion to kill. He feels that he's stalked by this compulsion. He can't control it. And he just lets out this anguished diatribe about how tortured he is by his own existence. And being the generous populace that they are, this tribunal has elected to allow him a sort of informal defense attorney. And so what ensues is a really interesting discussion between this mob and their leader, who's sort of, I would say, the big mob boss of the city, the big criminal leader of the city, and then Peter Lorre, the killer, and Peter Lorre's defense attorney, who is kind of like, I don't know if he's an actual lawyer or a disbarred lawyer, but he makes a pretty straightforward case for the defense of this individual based on him not being culpable for impulses that he has that he can't control. And it's not clear how things are going to pan out entirely. There's definitely some conflict when there's the deus ex machina of the state, the police coming into the cellar and rounding everybody up and taking him into the custody. And we see the courtroom gathering, and we're left to believe that normal court proceedings will ensue from there. But it's a really kind of interesting look into the morality of what to do with someone like that. And I think I'll leave it at that. And maybe you guys, if you want to get in on your reactions here.
And just so many thoughts, and I'm sure we all have a ton of thoughts about this, but just that decision for the ending, right, that you just kind of mentioned, where they come out to start the sentencing and it ends with the mothers, the deceased children waiting for it, but saying that, it's not going to take their children back. And it's kind of this focus of like, you can't undo what has been done, but it leaves the audience without the knowledge of what the sentencing ultimately is. And I can't imagine, like, it was just such a tense movie throughout. And then you have, as you're saying, that climactic scene with the speech and everything, where he's talking about this compulsion that he has that he's, deeply wishes wasn't there. And this kind of moral gray area of what we do with, that type of person, right, who just compulsively is a detriment or a danger to society and to others. But it's such a bold move for like audience members to then be left with the question. And I'm sure so many discussions were probably had as people walked out of the theater or as people finished that movie of what they think the sentencing was or should have been. So yeah, just really, 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 really amazing movie. No other thoughts. This is it.
Well, I think it's a good time to just to help lay the scene out for the audience. What a distinct persona and visual actor Peter Lorre is, who plays this killer, for lack of a better name at this point, M. He's got these big bulging eyes, and you may have seen him, if you like older movies, in later movies. I think he's in The Maltese Falcon, if I remember correctly, with Humphrey Bogart, which I watched last year. But such a distinct actor, and I didn't realize he was European, I assume, or maybe he's not. I need to do a little research.
I think he is, at least from that area of, I don't know where
Central
in Europe, maybe
Europe.
Austria, Hungary, but I do know that he fled, like he was living in Germany and he fled, as you said, shortly after. Oh no, you talked about Fritz Lang, but so Peter Lorre fled Germany the year after, I want to say, this movie came out, because of rising tensions with the Nazi party, and he was Jewish, so he fled, and then a couple years later Fritz Lang also fled. And I found out this movie was written to some extent in collaboration between Fritz Lang and his wife Thea von Harbo. And she ultimately, like, she ended up joining the Nazi party and stayed in Germany, even though she married a man from India who then had to leave in like 1939 or whatever because of, Nazi.
She not
at that point,
understand what their
I
whole
don't
thing
know.
was?
I was reading this and I was like, man, just the cognitive dissonance that it would take to be married to someone of Jewish descent, as Fritz Lang was, who left because of the Nazi party, and then be like, no, but they have some good ideas about like the economy, like what is going on?
I mean, it's the
Not
but
like-
surely clause of, but surely it won't apply in this case. It's only to XYZ person.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
That's
Like,
not
we see-
identifiable at
you
all
see
for
that
our
all the
times.
time. Yeah.
Yep, definitely not relevant to, what. Well, at this point, when this episode comes out, we'll just see if Trump makes good on his word of mass deportation on day one or not, because that's in the future for us, but in the past for this episode. So
Womp womp.
yeah.
What a downer. Let's get back to the child murder movie.
yeah. Let's get back to killing children.
I did want to ask, so this came out in the year of Skippy, and Trader Horn, etc.
Thank God
And
Skippy wasn't in
there's a
German.
lot.
Yeah, he could have been taken.
There's a lot of, like, I would say, huge technical achievements in this. There's a lot of really cool use of like sound and camera work and all sorts of things that we're not seeing in the movies that are being nominated for Oscars, which always makes me think of that really funny Bong Joon-ho quote where he's like, the Oscars being very local and it not being surprising that a Korean movie hadn't been nominated for the Academy Awards previous to Parasite, or the Best Picture. But I guess my question is, like, what surprised you the most about this movie? Was it just like the technical achievements? Like how, I just want to know. I feel like there's a lot potentially to talk about there.
I feel like that's what makes it so hard to hone in on kind of a first topic, because it's not only the technical achievements, like the use of shadow, the camera work, the really interesting like angles and everything that they chose. Also sound, as you said, which I feel like we'll probably get into each of these, but even the subject matter, right? The subject matter itself for this type of story, and then looking at it from a very morally gray sort of lens, especially as we're entering the Hays Code and getting closer to that, which enters Hollywood into an era of like, no, there is good and there is bad, and the good guys always have to be very clearly the winners, and so this just leagues different from what we're seeing in so many ways. And I did find out that Irving Thalberg, for the MGM exec Golden Boy, we love him. But he, after I guess watching this movie, assembled a bunch of MGM's writers and directors for a private screening and was like, "We need to make films of this caliber. This is like, what are we doing?" And it's just like, dang, yeah, it's hard to believe it came out in the same year, honestly.
Yeah, truly.
It ties back to, I think, what we've been saying earlier on, but we're realizing maybe we had misconceived notions about, which is to say, I really just assumed in these early years that everybody was going to be so like socially repressed. And I knew that, obviously there's like Ed Gein and awful serial killers during this time period and before it. but I couldn't have imagined it would be a topic for like a mainstream film. And obviously this is in Germany, but we're talking about, the worldwide cultural context to some extent. So I don't know that you could have had this after the Hays Code period really kicked off in earnest. And we know what happened in Germany shortly after this and the crackdown on morality and so many other things. So it almost feels like a last gasp of the bohemian 20s. I feel like is this movie to some extent, because it is just dealing with really heavy topics in a way that I think a movie that came out these days and had an ending like that would leave people riled in the theater and coming out of the theater. And it, not to segue already into this part of the discussion, but I am anti-death penalty in nearly all cases. I would venture to say all cases. I'm a Buddhist, so but it's really hard when the parents of the victims are there, and kind of, when you're a part of that, we're not in the mob, but we're watching the scene. The mob is getting riled up, and you're almost like, damn, I would really like to see this guy, get his comeuppance. And it makes you realize how easy it is to get swept up in the emotion of that, and why I think so many people are pro death penalty. But again, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself with that part of our discussion.
No, I think it's definitely something worth talking about, right? Because that's the whole question of the movie, or one of the many questions of the movies. And I don't think we need to wait to talk about it.
No, because I do think kind of exactly what you're talking about, that emotional catharsis for what is vengeance or righteous, whatever else. That is what drives a lot of the kind of system that we have, not only with the death penalty, but more of a punishment oriented system that is you did a bad thing, therefore you get punished, rather than you did a bad thing, how can we rehabilitate you? How can we fix the systems that exist? And I think it's important that it is such a horrific crime, because that is the most extreme, right, that you can get to. So it's okay, even in this case, now where do you stand? And so I think it's really, really interesting question. I also am anti-death penalty, and I don't know if this is more draconian or not, because I'm rehabilitation, but also if someone is at the point where it truly is a compulsion that cannot be with our understanding of medicine and therapy and science and whatever else, cannot be changed, true sociopathy, whatever disorders and stuff, it's well, maybe what if we cut off their hands so that they can't do crime?
Damn, code of Hammurabi, Sarah.
Yes.
Split that baby.
I'm just saying, what do we do? But at the same time, I don't know.
I know what you mean. I don't think that guy should be outside of an institution. And
exactly.
My concern would be that 35 years would pass, and they'd be like, well, he's an old man. He's no harm to anyone. Some well-to-do collegiate he participates in. They're like, well, he's been so good, and then they let him out. And, he's still
that's
got some fire in
what
him.
the safe cracker in the trial sequence says, right? I feel like it's really interesting how this movie engages with that topic of, it could be any of us, right? Of because we're lacking a definitive protagonist, right? The entire society is really kind of your protagonist, but you kind of have this turn towards the end of the movie where society kind of becomes your aggressor at that point. At first we have, they are the people accomplishing something. They're getting this man caught because the police are failing to do that, ACAB. But then by the time you get Peter Lorre's character in front of them, really he is being tried by a jury of his peers, aka a bunch of criminals. The man himself, who is leading the prosecution, is wanted for 3 manslaughters. And he's that's not relevant to this, but it really is, right? Where it could be any of you. And then also they make this argument of, well, if it's a compulsion, do we know if it's true or not? What happens when, like Jake said, it's 35 years later and people no longer think this man is dangerous? How do we deal with it then?
Yeah, exactly. Fun fact, the scene where they're having that hearing in the cellar, many of those extras were apparently criminals, ex-convicts and stuff that Fritz Lang had hired for
fun.
That scene. Yeah.
Get a little scratch, get a little cheese, a little bread.
And then he had made other crime thrillers in the past, and because of that, he had a pretty good relationship with the Berlin police and had like several contacts, several connections within like various bureaus, including the homicide bureau. So he did interview like actual murderers and stuff in preparation for this film. And I'm curious to find out if like any transcripts or any notes or anything exist from that sort of thing, because speaking back to like you were saying, Jake, right, for crime junkies out there, I feel like that's a very early kind of version of what a lot of people who study, right, the psychology behind murderers and serial killers and stuff, what they'll do. So I wonder if that exists anywhere.
I keep coming back to the question of, if it's not a compulsion, if he can't control it, why does he write the letter to the police and the press?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
At first, it comes off as what we see a lot of serial killers do, which is more of a like prideful taunting of
wanting
law
recognition
enforcement and stuff, and recognition and all of that. But when we see his anguish, right, in the end, it's like, no, it seems like this man is potentially genuinely tormented by this compulsion in him. And that might have even been almost a cry for help, wanting to be stopped. You know, there's
hard.
like an argument.
You can't see into his mind. You don't know if he's self-aware enough to be just desperately throwing anything against the wall to save his own hide, right? Or if he's really, and I guess that's the job of an expert psychologist to analyze, which is why the defense lawyer was saying it's the responsibility of the state to intervene at this point and take this man off the streets and deliver appropriate restitution, whatever it may be. But and not to change the topic already, but I can't get over the fact of the timing of this and the fact that this is a time period which I'm sure Fritz and others involved in this movie were aware of by this point, where populist political movements were taking Europe in particular by storm, whether you're talking about the Russian Revolution in 1917, less than 20 years, however long before this, and then you're talking about what is happening in Germany around this time. And it's almost like I got the vibe of the mob justice that the town was trying to deliver, almost felt like a proto, like the Nazi kind of impulse to just give over to those very base instincts of not going through with due process, but going with your gut
absolutely.
And just thinking about what's good for the collective. Don't think about this man as a human being. We just have to, cleanse him, so it very much felt like, I don't know if Fritz was consciously making a commentary on what was brewing in Germany at that time, but it felt like that to me. And that gave me pause because, like I said, when I was watching it, there were certain points I'm like, people in the mob are making sense. It would feel good to see this little rat, get his comeuppance. But then I'm like, wait, if this becomes the standard for how we treat other instances like this, we're going to fall into anarchy pretty quickly here.
Yeah, I think there was a point where some of us were puzzled in the movie where they do that first bar raid, right? Where we're not really sure, like, why are they raiding this bar? But I do know that in pre-war Berlin that they had already started to do like raids on gay bars and that sort of thing, to start criminalizing things that were not considered socially acceptable at the time, right? So to start cracking down on that sort of thing. And I feel like there are some of those shots in those movies where, especially early on, where you start to see like the police sweeps and trying to gather information and that kind of thing, where they are, it's so reminiscent of images that you'll see in later movies, to indicate Nazi Germany.
Where are your papers?
Yeah, and exactly. And I think the part that was kind of unnerving to me watching a lot of that, because obviously I think Fritz Lang and others were aware of this rising movement that hadn't quite come to power yet. But even without that, I think it's just like that more insidious reflection on like what happens in terms of human nature and stuff with mass hysteria and with the state and how like these crackdowns happen in this like us versus them, etc. So even without knowing what happens years later and seeing how it kind of almost like logically plays out, right? Like it's almost like this domino effect of once things hit a certain point and people are in this sort of frenzy, and you have an organization, whether that's the state or something else, that is there to provide a sort of organized solution that can get very dangerous and very horrific and ugly very quickly. So just seeing those parallels and knowing that many of this like methodology played out exactly like this in rating is just like, ugh, like it happens and it can happen again and it does happen again. And happened before all of this, so it's just like, damn.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like while we were watching it, I know that I think Jake and Sarah, you both commented, like by the time we get to the point where the organized criminals are trying to work their way through that office building, and Peter Lorre's character is hiding and trying to escape, but he's kind of stuck and like a trapped rat. I think that y'all started to comment of our career criminals are looking kind of bumbling and disorganized. And I think it's that weird thing of like really individually, they all seem very competent and had up to that point been more competent than the police, who were also like, doing the best they have with their very rudimentary investigation tools. But like at the end of the day, you might be individually competent, but as soon as you start to move in that like weird herd mentality, then you start to look foolish and make rash decisions and that sort of thing.
Santa, what did you think about the movie?
I'm like trying to catch up, but I mean, I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was very engaging, like from the beginning, immediately when it started, like it just kind of, it hooks you and then doesn't let go. And I feel like as the movie progresses, the grip kind of gets tighter, especially towards the end, because you're kind of like, oh my God, like they finally have him. And then during the trial sequence, like you're kind of hit with like the release of the tension of, okay, they've got him, they've cornered him, they're they're confronting him. And as a viewer, at least for me, you're going through those emotions, of like, okay, you can understand the anger that the mothers feel, the frustration of the criminals that want to continue, doing their stuff. And then at the same time, with the writing, they're hitting you with some very hard, like difficult questions. So like you as the viewer, you're watching the movie and it causes you to kind of reflect on not only yourself, but just in general, like your own views, your own values. So in regards to like the question of, okay, what do we do with somebody who has these compulsions, or somebody like, do we just lock them up and forget about them? Do we try to fix them, save them, And obviously, I think that's a question everybody always asks, not only in regards to criminals, but even in regards to, I don't know, in your personal life with people. Because one thing that I really liked about this movie, and I feel like in some ways modern movies today, when it comes to realistic stuff, is that Hollywood tends to, I guess, Hollywoodify these things, like when it comes to criminals and these really horrific things that people can do. And it's innate in everybody. It's like every human is capable of hurting another human. And I feel like having the murderer be like hunter of kids and stuff, it's very extreme. But I did like the way they went about it, where they didn't show anything. They just kind of used very subtle images of like the ball rolling out onto the grass and then the balloon floating away. There didn't need to be any gore, any violence. It didn't need to show the murder killing the poor kid like we see nowadays in movies. And going back to what I was saying before, is that like the way Fritz tied it at the end, with ending with the mothers crying and that one mother saying like, oh, take care of your kids, kind of like they're among us. And it really does make the viewer like unsettled, because it reminds you that people like that, they're not like the creature from the Black Lagoon, they don't come out during a full moon and then when the sun rises, they go back into the swamp. Like it's an everyday person. It doesn't matter. Like you can be working with them, you can be talking to them. Like you don't, like they're just normal people. And a lot of the times people do bad things. Some people do very bad things, but sometimes I feel like it's a lot more complicated than what Hollywood can kind of turn it into, where it becomes very black and white of like, oh, good, yeah, bad,
this is a monster.
evil.
This is not something that any of us would be capable of, when it's actually like, this is a person, but also it could be you, right?
Mhm.
Right. I would also add that it's not even just Hollywood, though. It is how many people think. And I think they touched on this a little bit in the film, right? When everyone is kind of screaming for justice, right? They're calling, he's an animal, they're calling him all of these sorts of things. And the defense lawyer makes a point of like, he's a human being. And I think that's not only a reminder of like, oh, how we should kind of treat the situation, but it's also a reminder that, like you said, Chrysantha, it's like, no, everyone has the capacity to do terrible things. And that is just part of the spectrum of being human, where unfortunately some people, and in this case, right, you're left with that moral question of how much control we even have over our personalities and our impulses and the things we do. Like in a lot of ways, we are fortunate to not have to fight those sorts of like desires, right? Those sorts of compulsions. And it's easier, right, to just think about, oh, this person by choice is doing these terrible things. They're a monster. They're inhuman, all of these things. But it's like, no, it is a little bit more complex than that. And again, just all that to say, it's not just movies that simplify things. I think people in general, out of like a discomfort, like to try and make it more black and white than it is.
Yeah, and like I'm a really big true crime person. So like, I mean, I grew up watching it a lot with my mom and stuff. So in this movie, we have this back and forth between the mob, with a lot of emotions, critiquing, angry about what this man has done. But then at the same time, the writers also include dialogue from the murderer himself. And you find out he's done evil things, but he's conflicted. He talks about his compulsions and stuff like that. Whether we know it's a lie or not, who knows? And I feel like that's a very realistic thing, even in real life. If you deal with somebody who's been doing hurtful things to you, like you don't always know. But like at the same time, you hear it from the source, from his mouth. And so like that's pretty much all you have to go off on. And so it reminds me a lot of like the Eileen Wuornos case when her case became public. She's kind of noted as the first woman serial killer, which was unheard of at the time. And obviously people villainized her because what she did was bad. But if you look back at the context and you go back and watch documentaries and stuff like that, like there were so many points in her life where it could have been prevented, where we take it back to the system, like this is way before even the murders happened. But her upbringing, the fact that like police involvement could have been there a lot sooner, maybe taking her out of the household she was living in because she also suffered abuse. And it kind of ties into that whole, hurt people type of thing. And, like kind of like prevention and intervention. And so watching the movie and watching that back and forth, I thought that was very intellectually stimulating because, like I said, like it's not very often in films when you're dealing with like a crime kind of scenario or plot, getting like a perspective from the other side and figuring out like, okay, it's not as black and white, there's something else going on, or there could be something else going on. But I would have maybe liked to know a little bit more about the murder, but obviously that's not the point of the film. The point of the film was like, they're among us type of thing. But just because like, I think the writing and the directing and all that, it really, for me, did a really good job at like stimulating me intellectually and then making me think about a lot and being like, oh, how, like I wanted, it piqued that investigative side of myself and really wanted to like continue to scratch until I got to the center of it.
There were definitely parts of the movie that I felt like probably influenced future mysteries, even like absolutely. The way that, they're kind of like piecing all the evidence together or trying to get their guy and stuff. So just a lot of threads, I think, from this movie or this type of movie that you can tie into different genres.
I'm thinking, where's SVU? We need Mariska Hargitay. We need Ice-T. We need Detective Munch. Like, these guys do not know what they're doing. They're too busy eating sausages.
Yeah, there's a lot of sausage. A
lot of sausages, a lot of chain smoking. I do not understand how everyone did not have emphysema at this point.
Well, give it a couple years and...
Yeah, exactly. I guess kind of pivoting to sound, because there's so much interesting stuff about this movie, I feel like, with the sound alone.
Yeah.
So like I don't even know where to start, but first, Jake, you had asked a question because there are segments of the movie that are completely silent, and there were a couple times where like, is this did we lose the sound?
Computer broken.
Like this is exactly it is intentional, well, partially intentional I should say, because 2/3 of the movie was shot with synchronized sound, but a third of it wasn't. And that was actually due to cost prohibition of like, it was expensive to get the
I love to see how people save a buck.
And then later they're like, didn't you like that artistic decision I made?
Yeah, it's so good.
Yes, it's so good. No, literally though, because so it was like, 2/3 with sound, 1/3 without. So it did keep, costs down for the movie, but Lang ultimately kind of liked that eeriness of the silent parts and intentionally kind of intercut those completely silent scenes. So you go from this very like boisterous, noisy, chaotic, hectic world where everyone, this like mass hysteria is building, into this just like complete silence. And it definitely worked, but it was not planned that way, which is pretty cool.
I love that. I love a happy accident where it's like you're trying to make your dollars work, and as a result you have to do something and then commit to it, right? It's so fun.
I think like exactly how you said about how it adds to the eeriness. When they're finally chasing him and they're showing like kind of like the aerial views of like the streets, and they're kind of like going through everything. I'm so used to seeing that in movies, but they make it so like hectic and boisterous, and having the complete opposite. I just felt hit a lot more than like being exposed to the messiness of it all, or the anxiety it makes you feel. It was like it was like a more of like an anxiety from fear, I guess. I don't know if that's the best way to explain it, but the movie would have been different if it had been like, if it had sound throughout it. I feel.
It would have felt silly.
Yeah, or anything, or even just the noise. And it's so weird because it's like those sequences visually are still ahead of their time. So with sound, we probably would have been talking right now of like, remind ourselves that even though this is a common sort of thing, this is, a very, very early example, potentially one of the first times we've seen this sort of sequence. But instead, because the sound isn't there, then it's this whole other layer that we get to appreciate even as modern viewers, right? We don't have to remind ourselves that like, this was first though, like this was early, because it's just like, no, this is just different from what
it's not ubiquitous. Yeah.
So Fritz had a lot of really great shots in this movie. There's so many you can point out. There's looking down the manhole with the flashlight coming up, and the robber getting caught by the police. There's some really great
the hole that he's
transitions, through windows and whatnot. But I think my favorite is the under the desk in front of the totally sloshed, hot, sweaty, like 10 sausage links in police captain. He's been sitting at his desk for like a week straight, just chain smoking and drinking and trying to connect the dots. And for whatever reason, Fritz gives us a very close-up shot right underneath his desk, and it was a choice. I'll put it that way.
Moose knuckle shot.
That's the one that stuck out.
God,
yeah, that was rough. I'll put it that way.
And he held it there too. It wasn't like just a flash. Yeah. It was there for a while.
Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to circle back to something you guys said, and I don't want to get too far off the purview of discussing our film here, but I feel like as the resident sappy optimist romantic, I understand what you guys are saying about every human being has the capacity to do something like this. But I do have to plant my flag to say that, and this might betray my own ignorance or my childishness to not be willing to mentally admit to this, but I do think there are certain thresholds that like something goes wrong specifically. And I think that sexual abuse or murder of a child, or even just killing, my understanding, and I'm not a scientist, but my understanding as it relates to like my faith in Buddhism and other things I've looked into, is that it is actually not natural for a human being to kill another human being. And certain things have to occur internally for that to happen, whether they be conditioned to it by like military training or by mass mob hysteria or whatever it may be. I do really think that there's something that sets a person who does that, let's say, on their own initiative for some kind of gratification in the way that this killer did. So I don't know that I agree with the contention that everyone has the capacity to do something like this. I do think that
that's not
I
what
think
we're
it's
saying.
not that you're gonna go like kill
Wake
someone, right?
up,
It's
yeah.
that
Yeah.
if you were put into the same circumstances that
Right.
person experienced that
Right.
led them to that point, that you are not immune. Like it's that
Right.
it's
Exactly.
it's not that
Like a
they are
compulsion,
like,
you
built
mean?
different. Well, it's
whatever it is.
whatever it is. It's that if you had the same compulsion, then are
Mhm.
you
That's
are you naturally immune to that? Or it's like, or if you were in the scenario where, all you did as a child was lick lead paint off window
Yeah.
sills.
You ate
And-
paint
or-
chips.
Did you
like,
see my home videos?
Whatever it is, right? Where people, it's not that you personally or like everyone is going to go out and murder someone. Like we're not going to go the purge. I think it's that the people that this happens to are not a completely different species.
Right.
I think they are. I think that's why
Oh,
we have
man.
to study them.
I don't think that's true.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the problematic type of thinking that leads to this type of,
Yeah.
not only mob justice or whatever else.
I'm not saying kill them.
No, I know,
I
but
don't
it's
But I
that
think
think
treatment.
that's
everyone
the kind
has
of thing of like, if I am if I go kill someone, if I think, oh, only serial killers are a completely different species from me, so actually I'm not going to examine this act that I did because that couldn't be me. Is really all it is.
I'm not saying we
It's of
should.
like-
No, I'm saying because they are different, we need to examine and find out what's going on.
Sure,
my-
and what I'm saying, like, so there, to me, this is why I called it a spectrum, right? Like, there are certain
That's
things
probably the best way to
where
put it.
it's literally people with compulsions. Something is like twisted in their brain. It's not like whether it's nature or nurture is probably up for debate to some extent. But to Abby's point, and kind of to the point I think we're trying to make in the movie is asserting as well, is that if you were in the same mindset, if you were in the same upbringing, if you went through the same thing, it is within the human capacity to become this. It's not just like some alien came down to be like, I'm here to murder children. And in terms of kind of what you were talking about in terms of like it not being natural for a human being to take another human being's life, I would love to agree with that. And I think that in an ideal kind of perfect scenario, that would be true. But I also think that at the end of the day, for survival, for various other things, it's not just military training. It's a feeling of threat from another person that can drive people to violence. And I think that kind of threshold for what the threat is varies person to person. Like
Yeah.
apocalypse scenario, just kill me. Like I'm not gonna go be killing people. Like just take me out, But other people are
I
not
want to be the
same.
Duke of New York.
No, I'm like, no, I'm done. That's not a world I want to live in. But there are people who will fight and kill for their own survival, for protection of others, for perceived protection of themselves or others. You even see it with resource hoarding. You see like COVID happens and people are like, I need to buy 1,000 rolls of toilet paper. And it's just like, it literally, if we could just relax and just work together.
Right.
But I think this is why I call it a spectrum. I think that threshold is different for everyone in terms of thinking about how to protect whatever is most important to them, and how wide that circle is going to vary from person to person.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it.
I think the
Yeah.
spectrum is I'm more comfortable with that logic. I don't think you've changed your position, but I don't know. I just feel like I had to plant my flag. And I'm not saying that to dehumanize them. I'm just saying like, I don't, the world, we live in a very dark world right now, guys. I don't know if our listeners have noticed, but it's like, I just have to
Yeah.
believe that we can be good. And more to the point of the end of the movie, to draw this to its logical conclusions, should our state institutions reflect our highest aspirations as human beings, or should
Right.
they cater to our basest instincts, which I think is part of what this movie is talking about.
Right.
And I try to think of myself in the former category. Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely.
I thought it was really interesting the way he described his compulsion. Like I've seen a lot of like serial killer movies and stuff like that, but I don't know that I'd ever heard it described in the way Peter Lorre very compellingly describes it in his performance.
Yeah, great scripting, great performance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so obvious besides just his distinctive appearance, but his skills as an actor, why he became such a fixture in Hollywood. But he describes his compulsion as he almost victimizes himself in the sense that he feels he's being followed by himself down alleyways. He's being surveilled. He's under threat by himself. And it's only when he blacks out in his phrasing of it, although it seems very premeditated when you see him do it. But when he has these episodes of violence and he takes the life of a child is when he has a release from this oppressive feeling. And I guess that was his way of trying to conceptualize verbally what like a compulsion is. But I just thought it was an interesting, maybe from a writing perspective, Abby, as you mentioned, like way to phrase that.
Yeah, it's really compellingly written, like very. I think too, it helps you have that great intercutting too of seeing the people in like this kangaroo court audience, basically of like, you know, that they're all criminals and some of them kind of start to nod along with him.
Yeah,
and also you see like some women in the crowd like getting visibly frightened by the picture that he's painting, where there is kind of a level of empathy in among the crowd, even if it's like being frightened, that's still like an empathetic response, right? But yeah, there's that level of anyone would be scared by the description that he gives of this thing that was happening to him.
Yeah, and I think that's why that ties into kind of what we were talking about in terms of that spectrum, right? And like I said, feeling fortunate to not have such compulsions, because those people nodding along in the crowd, it's like anyone who has probably struggled with addiction, right? Or has struggled with kind of trying to fight these sorts of compulsions or baser instincts will likely understand deeply the way that he's describing his own attempts, right? At like just not being able to escape this sort of desire that he has, as warped and, you know, violent as it is.
I think
so. Yeah.
I just connected a dot that I'm very excited about that I think is a cool screenwriting thing. There is, so like Chrysanthemum was saying at the end of the movie where like the last sequence is the crying mothers who are basically like, think of the children. There's a really fantastic parallel of weirdly paralleling Peter Lorre's character with the kids in the very first scene of the movie where the kids are playing a game with ball and they're singing a song about like a shadow man coming to cut you up, where it's like being pursued of like everyone is being pursued by the shadow in the story. Oh, great.
Yeah,
amazing. Love it.
My thinking, Jake, when you were talking in terms of like seeming premeditated, etc., I had the thought of, we mentioned when he whistles in the Hall of the Mountain King, like that might also be we'll call it like a disassociation sort of thing, right? Like some sort of thing that's going on in his mind and his character, like as he gets kind of overtaken, right, by these, where it's like that's the turning point for him, that once he goes through those sorts of motions, then it's like it's in motion. He can't be stopped at that point.
To build off that, there's two sequences where he sees his own reflection. And one is in the beginning where he sticks his finger kind of in the corner of his mouth, almost to like make a Joker smile. And then later he's in a storefront and he sees a little girl in the reflection and he kind of, you can see him disassociate in the moment. And I'm pretty sure he puts his finger in the corner of his mouth. And like you say, he starts humming or whistling. That must be it.
Whistling.
I feel like this movie's like definitely
it's so
needs a
good.
rewatch.
So ahead of its time.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, I want to rewatch it now that I kind of know more about everything, like his character as a whole. And then just circling back, because I know when I talked about this movie being snubbed, I had mentioned knowing that there was a leitmotif of that song, which I also just found out is pronounced leitmotif for real. So sorry for all of the years where I mispronounced this. But it is the first time. I know, but it is the first time that it's used in film. So for those who don't know, it comes from, I think, the world of opera, where there will be a certain song that signifies a specific character or event or place,
like Team Rocket,
song, right? Yeah, exactly. Like Team Rocket, blasting off again. That is that's a leitmotif.
I truly love that Twitter post, and I don't know who posted it, so sorry to not credit you. But hey, why is your leitmotif playing in minor key?
Yeah, exactly.
You guys are so smart, because Sarah mentioned, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, and now I know. A leitmotif, and I know how to say
your
it
character theme song.
Yeah, everyone should have that.
Everyone should have that.
Like a social security number.
Okay, everyone pick their leitmotif.
Yeah. And it's just like really in our minds in the way that we consume media, because it's just such a part of movies and film and TV and even video games. Like even the concept of like, why do I hear boss music playing? Like that is literally a leitmotif, right? Like why does it suddenly feel like the vibe has changed and I'm in danger? Well, that's because you've got
your ear has been trained.
Like Darth Vader. His theme song is probably one of the most iconic uses of like a leitmotif, but it all came from this movie. Well, technically from opera, but then it was stolen from opera and came from this movie.
I was going to say, I would be compelled to choose the Imperial March as my leitmotif, but then I'm thinking about like going on a date or something. It's just like setting the wrong mood, you know?
Jake the Buddhist with the Imperial March.
Yeah, but it's so good.
I'm sensing some dissonance here.
It'll give me like inherent masculinity.
What's that? What is it? Is it Benny Hill or the
Oh,
like
yeah,
really?
yeah,
that's like a funeral director.
No. So good. But yeah, just fantastic movie, and obviously very layered and nuanced.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie, Sarah. I'm glad that you chose it, and I'm going to definitely recommend this.
The Academy did not choose this movie, though.
Again, as Bong Joon-ho said, the Oscars are very local.
He's such a
It's quite upsetting though, because like it's just like going back and watching it. You know, us being in 2025 now, like Jake said earlier, like I didn't ever expect that this kind of material existed during back then. Watching a film with like really good hard hitting kind of like content and stuff like that, making you think, that's kind of like writing that I would expect for modern movies, but not really for a movie set in like the 30s. And for me, it's a little disappointing because it's like, I wonder what else is out there. You know,
like what else are we missing?
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder that like as we do this project, right, of yes, there are movies that are going to be very representative of the times that we're going to be watching for the Oscars, but also there's a whole, it's not even remotely the full picture. It's not remotely the full picture of movie history, cinema history, of, even necessarily it's the reflections of the Hollywood studio mentality of the period, not necessarily really the reflections of either filmmaking as a whole, certainly not international filmmaking, or even necessarily society as a whole, like what they were looking at and thinking of.
Yeah, which is part of what makes it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
To see that reflected, but yeah, I feel like we are missing out on some great content. This is why we've got bonus episodes, though.
I'm glad we do, because 1931 was otherwise trash, as listeners know.
Really
except for Skippy. Skippy's
so
okay.
Bad.
Oh my god, I just keep thinking about Eastland of like just cracking up
cliff.
laughing.
I want to talk about Eastland because I watched Eastland alone and I teared up at that. So I'm embarrassed about that.
You're a beautiful pure soul, Jake.
Any other thoughts before we wrap it?
The thing that surprised me most about this movie that made me like gasp is that Peter Lorre's character got 2 cognacs for $1.65.
Yeah, I saw that too. I was like, $1 what?
Like, excuse me? I'm gonna go there. Yeah. My God.
Luckily, brand inflation is over now, so no worries.
Can't wait.
Yeah, exactly. We don't got to worry about that anymore. Perfect. Well, do we think I feel like the question's not even worth asking because it's like
don't
we're
even
all
bother.
It's worth watching. Everyone thinks it's worth watching. Everyone go and watch this movie. It's available on a bunch of streaming sites.
I think actually, here's my thought: is you should watch this one, but also you should watch. I know in the mainline episode that we recorded for this year, I said skip everything. I think that you should go watch Skippy to honor Jake, and then you should also go watch this movie so that you can see the radical difference in movie making of this year.
Yeah,
that's true.
Skippy would have gotten out of that scenario. I mean, I'm just saying, if Peter Lorre had Skippy in an alley, Skippy would have been like, "Look here, you bug-eyed little guy." He would have said something cool, and then he would have cured him of his child killing. That's what Skippy does.
I think Skippy would escape, and I also would believe that Skippy and Sookie somehow through their shenanigans would have been able to catch him much more quickly.
I don't love the implications of Skippy and Sookie like baiting and trapping a child murderer.
Okay, I meant more. I didn't know about baiting and trapping, but I feel like they could have tracked him down. You know, like one of them became like he escaped as a victim, and then later they're like, "But I got a good look at his face." You know?
I'm just saying
so
the implications of this fan fiction are bad.
They are bad. They are bad.
Skippy sitting on the shoulders of Sookie with a trench coat like a detective in the German police headquarters. Like, "Listen here, get those sausages out of your mouth, Fritz. We got a child killer to catch you."
See, the funny thing to all of this to me, because you guys probably don't remember, but it's fresh in my mind because I've just like basically finished editing that episode, is Jake, you actually recommended when I described the plot of M as a child killer. You recommended a Skippy M crossover. So it's good to see that.
We're laughing ourselves. Shit.
Exactly. So a good idea stays a good idea. Thank you everyone for joining us for this bonus episode. Again, fantastic movie. Cannot state it enough. Next episode, we'll be watching, what are we on? The fifth year of the Academy Awards. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and join us. Yeah, is it flying by? We're still in the 30s.
It's flying by for me, but I'm not the editor, so.
Is Sarah over here like dragging a block at the end of a long chain?
We're like, "You okay,
You're still
Sarah?"
having fun, right?
I'm fine. Tell my family I love them.